It's time for a chat with Pat. It's Joni.
Okay, Joni, again, this is such a meaty chapter that we're dealing with here. There is so much in here on the Holy Land, especially. We're still in chapter 7, but man, I don't think we spent that much time on all the chapters as much as we are in this one. But again, so much here. So we want to talk about today a little bit about the Crusades and St. Francis. I will admit, I've taught the Crusades in church history. I never think of them as a pilgrimage. So can you kind of cue us into how are these pilgrimages actually, or these Crusades actually a pilgrimage?
Yeah, so I'll let you peek behind the curtain a little bit with the author point of view. It was difficult to know how to tackle the idea of the Crusades and the topic of the Crusades in this book because I can't do them justice. Right? When you're writing a book like this, you have to just kind of grips with, I'm presenting stories, and I purposely talked about the Holy Land and Rome and other pilgrimage places through the lenses of the saints. And so I was like, I can't do any of this justice, and I certainly can't do the Crusades justice. People need to go read more about the Crusades and the true story of the Crusades. But what I realized I could tell was the story of St. Francis, which we'll talk about in a second.
Sure.
But then also being honest that the Crusades were presented as a pilgrimage. So when Pope Urban calls for the Christian armies, the Catholic armies of Europe, which at the time were spent, their energy and their money was spent fighting each other,
right?
Problem. So Catholic kingdoms are fighting each other and causing trouble. Pope Urban's like, you know what? We have bigger problems. How often is this in our lives, right?
Right.
Like that we focus on our little problems, which aren't really problems, when there's in the global world, there's much bigger problems. Pope Urban said, you know what? We've been asked to help. The Byzantine emperor asked Pope Urban to help them and liberate the holy places. And so Pope Urban said, hey, guys, stop fighting amongst yourselves. Go to the Holy Land and liberate Jerusalem. But he placed this request within a call for pilgrimage, which is why things like indulgences are connected to the Crusades. It's not an indulgence to go kill people. And I think that's really important. And when we misrepresent the Crusades, we say, oh, it's just like the Muslim call, to go and kill as many people as you can, and then you'll get heaven. That's not the Crusades at all. The indulgence was given to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and to do that, they needed to liberate these holy places. So he placed this call for crusade within the call for pilgrimage to the holy places, which had been paused because of the dangers, because of the Muslim occupation.
Wow. So that's interesting because does that kind of describe then, because when you kind of, you all these different crusades for whatever, does that describe why we look at the Crusades as a battle plan, but if you look at them as a pilgrimage, it changes how they are actually carried out, because so often you think, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? When you're reading about the Crusades, because it doesn't seem like a clear battle plan.
Right. It's not at all. It's this ragtag, and sometimes this ragtag group of people, they're like, okay, like we think of the Children's Crusade, which is terrible. It was a terrible time in history. These kids were like, yeah, we'll go on pilgrimage.
Wow.
And so Thomas Madden, who I quote in the book, who is an excellent Crusade historian, if people want to know more about this, they should look up Thomas Madden, the Crusade historian, I believe still teaches at St. Louis University.
Ooh.
But he says the Crusades were not a well-coordinated army, but he says, this is a quote, a loosely organized mob of soldiers, clergy, servants, and followers heading in roughly the same direction for roughly the same purposes.
Wow.
So you have several crusades which are united under generals and,
Sure.
leaders from different Catholic kingdoms. We think of the First Crusade probably being the most organized. Also, King Louis of France takes a later crusade that's organized. But that's why we have kind of this ragtag thing. And some of them are successful and some of them are terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's people going on pilgrimage.
That's interesting. So, this is the other thing, Joni, you tie in St. Francis here, obviously in the year of St. Francis, but I never connected Francis's visit with the Sultan to a pilgrimage. So can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so St. Francis, a man of peace, is like, you know what, I have a better answer to this. If we want to liberate the holy places, what if we just convert everybody? And I love this. I love it. He's like, let's just go convert everybody, and then everyone will be Christian, and we'll liberate the Holy Place.
Right.
So he goes, he really wants to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And so, but he goes right into the Egyptian Sultan's camp and boldly preaches the gospel in hopes of converting him, in hopes of liberating the holy places in a very different way. And I think of this journey of peace that Pope Leo just completed in Africa, that, you know, people are criticizing him for not speaking out against the persecution of the Christians and not speaking out against the violence that Islam causes in Africa. And I think, well, he's also going as a pilgrim of peace. And he's kind of like St. Francis, going and saying, can we just talk? Because if we could talk, and I could get you all to see the joy of the gospel and the beauty of the gospel, that would solve all our problems.
Yeah.
And so I love this, in some ways, craziness of St. Francis. He's a little crazy. We have to admit that. But he succeeds at least in getting the Sultan to listen to him. And while the Sultan doesn't convert to Christianity, he does give Francis safe passage to make his pilgrimage. And that's connected to why the Franciscans have custody of the holy places today in the Holy Land.
That's amazing. I kind of thought that was why Franciscans have, kind of take care of a lot of these sites in the Holy Land. I thought it was because of St. Francis, but I wasn't sure. But you also talk about a Dominican priest, Felix Fabri. Am I saying that right?
Fabri, yes.
What was his role in this whole thing of pilgrimage?
So what I love about him is that he really tried to share the fruit of his pilgrimage. So he goes to the Holy Land recognizing that this is a great gift, that he gets to go and that not everybody gets to go. And so he writes extensively about the sites that he's praying at and the experiences he has so that his fellow Dominican brothers, so that cloistered religious can experience these holy places. And so he describes the sites, and you can still read his writings today. I read them extensively for the book. He describes the sites often using things that these people would have known, like using, things from their home. Like, do you remember this place? This is what this looks like. And he's writing both to entertain, educate, but also to provide spiritual wisdom for those people who couldn't make a pilgrimage. And what I love about Felix is that this is what we're all called to do. When we go on pilgrimage, we're not just going for ourselves. We're going to bring the fruits of that pilgrimage home into our daily life and to share those experiences with others.
Oh, I love that, Joni. So let's kind of end with this idea of Pope Paul VI, St. Pope Paul. He ends up in the Holy Land, and we haven't had popes in the Holy Land for a long time, right?
Yeah, Paul VI was the first pope to return to the Holy Land since Peter. The first time a successor of St. Peter had returned to the Holy Land. And he goes back as a pilgrim, really to meet with the Orthodox Church, to have kind of again, dialogue, peaceful dialogue, to say, we're all on the same side. We're all preaching the gospel. Let's talk about this. So Paul VI went, and then John Paul II went, then Benedict went, and we have popes going afterwards. But Paul VI is the first pope to go back to the Holy Land.
That's amazing. And was that the time that they lifted the excommunications from the Great Schism at that point?
Yes, he meets with the Patriarch of Constantinople, and eventually it leads to that mutual lifting of the excommunications after the Great Schism of 1054. So it's such a beautiful time of dialogue. And a beautiful time of peace. And, in that spirit of St. Francis, can we actually talk about things and love each other and see how our problems can be solved through that?
Well, Joni, once again, wonderful job in talking about pilgrimages. And boy, that Crusade pilgrimage thing really helped me a lot. So thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend ahead.
Thanks so much, Pat. God bless.
Bye-bye.